They talk like men who have seen things and wish they had not. They speak with the weariness of those who mistook the map for the territory, who rode out thinking they understood the shape of the land, and found themselves in a country they did not know, that they could not name. They speak of Red Scare as if it were a thing that died, a thing that turned. But they do not ask why it was ever there to begin with. That is the first mistake. If a culture rewards spectacle, then spectacle it will receive. These podcasters, these polemicists, these self-styled dissidents who started with a glimmer of discontent, they did not emerge from the earth like some errant species new to nature. They were crafted, cultivated in the petri dish of a society that makes of rebellion a thing to be sold, a thing to be monetized. Theirs is not some unique betrayal, nor some singular failing. It is the inexorable gravity of capital, the inescapable pull of a machine whose gears grind on indifferent to the forms it chews through. What happened to Red Scare is what happens to all things within this system. They found themselves beholden to an audience, and an audience must be fed. Those doing the Nefarious Russians episode seem perplexed at this, as though they had not seen it before. But they have. It is an old story. If they had been alive 100 years earlier, they would have seen it in the writers who began in protest and ended in the salons of the very people they once ridiculed. They would have seen it in the newspapers that started in truth and ended in the pockets of the powerful. They would have seen it in the movements that began with fire and ended in bureaucracy. There is no shortage of cautionary tales, but a man does not see the trap when he believes himself immune to it. The hosts of Red Scare began with mockery. They called out hypocrisy in the way a man might call out to his friend across a crowded room. They did not do so because they had some great project for the world. They did so because they could, because it amused them, because the machine rewarded them for it. But a podcaster who builds their house on sand should not be surprised when it shifts beneath them. Theirs was a mockery built on the pretense of detachment, of critique without direction, of rebellion without revolution. And what is such a thing but the inevitable first step toward reaction? If you stand in opposition to power without understanding it, without seeking to dismantle it, you will soon find yourself in the company of those who wish to wield it for their own ends. They say they were once of the left, that they were once in the fold of the Bernie movement, that they saw its failure and recoiled. But what did they expect? The function of liberal democracy is to absorb and neutralize dissent, to turn it inward, to consume it in the machinery of political theater. This is not a flaw. This is the system working precisely as designed. And if you mistake the loss of a single electoral campaign for the death of all hope, if you believe that a movement's fate is tied to the whim of one man, then you were never in the movement to begin with. You were in the audience. And the audience demands a new act. And so the hosts turned. They call it a natural shift, a response to the madness of the left. But to drift to the right in reaction to the failures of the left is not some inevitable tide. It is a choice. It is the choice of a person who, faced with the collapse of one system, flees not to the horizon but to the nearest available shelter, even if that shelter is built by the very forces that set the fire to begin with. To claim that it was the left that changed, that they merely remained as they always were, is the rhetoric of a person unwilling to reckon with their own choices. Power did not shift. It never does. It is they who moved toward it. In the end, the voices in the podcast episode lament the loss of something they cannot quite name, a sense of promise, of cultural weight, of significance. But that was never the point. The point was never to be seen, to be known, to be followed. The point was to build. And Red Scare never built. It entertained, it provoked, it mocked. And now it finds itself adrift, not because the world has changed, but because the world is as it always was. And those who do not know how to fight for something real will find themselves drawn to whatever audience remains. A person does not need to sell out if they were never truly for sale to begin with. So let the podcast die. Let it drift into the archives of forgotten controversies, a relic of a moment that was never meant to last. The world does not lack for those who will mock. What it lacks is those who will build. If these folks wish for something greater, let them stop writing obituaries and start writing manifestos. Because the machine is still here, and it is still hungry,